Hi, this is Chuck Benedict, mentor for Team 997 Spartan Robotics in Corvallis, Oregon. This next video in my series of vision processing videos is going to show you how to run the debugger for the vision processing application on a remote from a workstation to the application running on a Raspberry Pi. I have here my trusty Raspberry Pi 3 that I've used in prior videos. I've got a camera plugged into it. I've got it plugged into my local network. And so what I wanted to show you is that with Visual Studio Code, similar to Eclipse in the past, you can launch an application remotely on the Raspberry Pi and then using Visual Studio Code run the debugger remotely against that application. So the first thing that we want to do to make that happen is we want to run a build and a deploy of the CameraVision project with the target being the Raspberry Pi. So the command that I've got here, which is located in the README, is Gradle W deploy -x test to exclude running tests locally because we're going to be building with a Raspberry Pi target. And the -p for a parameter of target equals arm-Raspbian. So when we run that, in fact, I'll do that now and I'll talk about it. When we run that, it's going to run the build with the target being the Raspberry Pi, and then it's going to run a deploy which will copy all of the necessary components over to the Raspberry Pi and install them from apt-get if necessary, and then copy the binaries that it built as well. And in addition to that, it's going to copy some helper scripts over that will allow you to run all the necessary components on the Raspberry Pi so that from the debugger you can attach remotely to that application and debug it. So we'll give it a moment to finish running the build. And actually, while we're letting it run the build, let's run a terminal emulator and log into the Raspberry Pi. I'm using the terminal emulator called Putty, P-U-T-T-Y. And so I will log in as Pi and Raspberry is the default password. We can see that the build is successful. That's great. And there should now be a directory on the Raspberry Pi called bin, which there is. And we can see that there is some files over here, the jar file, the binary of the build project, our OpenCV native shareable load library, and in particular a startup debug.sh file. So that file has all the necessary bits in it to run all of our network tables, server, our camera streaming apps, and then the CameraVision application run for remote debugging. So all you have to do is start it. And if it says listening for transport DT socket at address 1044, 1044 being the port for remote debugging, you know you're good to go. So now back over to the project, go to the debug tab, and when you drop down the debug list, you'll see two debug configurations. The top one is the one that I talked about in a prior video. This bottom one here, debug vision coproc.local attach, assuming you didn't change the name of that. And actually, before I run that, I should mention that as a configuration step, let's look at the launch.json file, which is where this configuration sits. If you named your Raspberry Pi Vision coproc, the host name, in a prior video I talked about naming it. If you named it that name, then you're good to go. If you named it some other host name, then you will need to change that host name here in this file before running this. So assuming that's correct, pick that configuration and hit the play button. And I had already set a breakpoint in main.java, and you will see that we're at the breakpoint. And if you start stepping through the project, you will see that we can debug the application. And in fact, I have my camera pointing at balls right now, and if I set a breakpoint down here somewhere, let's actually set it at drawing the circles. For those of you that haven't seen the other videos, this application is finding blue racquetballs and is drawing a yellow circle around them, and it's counting them. And this line right here is actually drawing the yellow circles. So if I hit continue, so it's now the point of drawing the yellow circles, and it has already captured an image right here, and it has, in addition, found the blobs. If I can find the variable, let's see here. My interpreter balls found. So my interpreter class against the pipeline has already executed, and it has found, if I can bring it up here, oh, interpreter, that's what I'm looking for. Oh, it's not showing the instance variables, but if I could get it to show the instance variables, we would see that there are already balls found because my camera is pointing at balls. So in any case, what I hope this showed you is that you can run the debugger remotely to a remotely executing version of the project and be able to debug it. So I hope you found this video helpful, and thanks for watching.